Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am here to do the Picture This tag. This tag was originally created by Shelly Swearingen and Jack from Spread the Book Joy. And this is a tag about adults reading picture books. And I was tagged by Elizabeth at Bouquins and Books. Now this is kind of an unusual tag for me to do because I don't have kids and I have not read a children's picture book in probably 40 some odd years when I was a little kid. But I was tagged by Elizabeth and she doesn't really read a lot of picture books either. So I'm going to accept this as a challenge to see what I can do. Now the actual tags talk about picture books, but the answers don't necessarily have to be picture books. As I said, I don't read a whole lot of picture books. The kind of picture books I would read would be something like this. Max Ernst's The 100 Headless Women. And he was a French surrealist artist. And he did collage paintings or pictures where he just basically cut out pictures from magazines, I believe, added some illustrations, and it's very surrealistic, but this really is not a book that children would enjoy very much. That's the kind of picture books that I would read normally. So I'm going to do the tag, and let's see what kind of answers I can come up with for this. Prompt number 1. Love You Forever, written by Robert Munsch and illustrated by Shelly McGraw. Name a book you imagine you will love forever. I am going to pick A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. This is a very famous novel written by an author who could not get his book published, and he committed suicide. And many years later, his mother convinced Walker Percy to publish this book, or got Walker Percy to publish it, to a publisher, and it won the National Book Award. And it is the story of Ignatius, who is a grossly fat, bigoted, obscene, demented man. And you love him and you hate him at the same time. But his adventures in New Orleans are absolutely hilarious. What he does to the poor Levy Pants Company, you cannot get out of your mind. It is just beyond comparison that anyone could be so bombastic and intelligent and idiotic at the same time. And then there's Ignatius Riley's other career as a seller of Paradise hot dogs. 12 inches of paradise is Ignatius's logo for selling hot dogs. And I can imagine loving that book forever. I've probably read it 5 times. I've read it in paperback, I've read it in audiobook, and I've read it in digital. It's just a magnificent novel, but you have to understand that Ignatius is a man you will hate and you will love him too. Prompt number 2, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, Very Bad Day, written by Judith Viorst and illustrated by Ray Cruz. Which books or comforting things do you turn to when you're having a bad day? If I'm having a bad day and I'm bunged, I don't read. That sort of level of anxiety just shuts down my reading capacity, and I stew and I fume and I wait for it to be over and then I return to normal. But there is no comforting book that I turn to. Maybe short stories, but even that is highly doubtful. Prompt number 3, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carlisle. Which book series character sparked your hunger for reading? I think I've mentioned this a number of times. The book that started me reading was The Tomb and Other Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. This is an old Bantam, or is it Ballantine paperback, of a head being split open and bats trying to crawl their way out of the gap in the skull. And I just really loved reading that book. My sixth grade teacher was not all that enthused that I was reading that kind of book, but she let it happen. And that's really what started me off on reading. Book prompt number 3, Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. What's the most unusual book you've ever read? Now, I'm going to give the same answer as Elizabeth because it truly is the most unusual book I have ever read. Let me pull it out of here. And that is, oh, look at that shining cover. A Void by George Perec. This is a novel that's written as a lipogram. And a lipogram is a constrained form of writing where the author cannot use a letter. And the letter George Perec chose when he originally wrote it in French was the letter E. In French, as in English, the letter E is the most common letter. And it is basically a mystery story. But it's just the strangest mystery story you've ever read. And so he writes this so it's been translated into English by Gilbert Adair. And he did the same thing, is he wrote the book without using the letter E. Now, as Elizabeth said, I think this is in the spirit of the original. There's a lot of things you just cannot do in translation. And one of the things he did is that there is a section in the book where there's poetry listed. And it's a very famous poem. In English, the author chose the pose The Raven, but he translated it as Blackbird. And when I just found it so fascinating when I was reading this that I had to look it up in the original French. And the original French is a poem by Victor Hugo. And so the poet the translator just changed poems. And I guess that's okay. Now, I'm going to read a section of poetry in here to show you what a lipogram is like. Now, I'm not going to read the Blackbird. I'm going to read Living or Not Living. And tell me if you can guess which original piece of writing this came from. No, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Living or not living, that is what I ask. If 'tis stamped of honor to submit to the slings and arrows wafted by us by ill winds, or brandished arms against a flood of afflictions, which by our opposition is subdued. Of course, that's Hamlet's famous speech from William Shakespeare. I really recommend this book if you like language. The story is kind of funky, but it is just such a joy to read this book without the letter E. And again, as Elizabeth mentioned in hers, is that Perec eventually wrote a short story where all the words can only be spelled, or all the vowels can only use the letter E. And in English, that is called the Exeter Text. And I'm going to give a brief quote from this. Deep dentelle screened the 7 green Mercedes-Benzes, resembled pastured sheep. They descended West End Street, swerved left, entered Temple Street, then swept between the green Vennels, beeches, elms, and elders. Now, one of the things the author said, or the translator said, was a legitimate cheat was when you have and, he just puts in the letter N. It's a convention. to get the story written with only the letter E as a vowel. I did not like it as much as A Void, but still, if you like to play with language, go ahead and pick them up. I know that Mark Nash did not think kindly of George Perex's efforts here, or the translators. He thought is just not writing a real book. It's just an exercise in linguistic abilities. And he's sort of right. It is sort of that, but it is also still very fascinating. Prompt number 5. Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. What is your favorite book featuring the natural world? Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. John Krakauer was a journalist, mostly working for magazines like Outdoor. And he was assigned a task to talk about these for-profit expeditions that would take people up to the top of Mount Everest. These people did not necessarily have a lot of mountain climbing experience, but they said they could get anyone to the top of Mount Everest. And Krakauer's job as a journalist was to go and find out what these expeditions are doing. But Krakauer himself was almost a professional mountain climber. He did a lot of mountain climbing in his youth. And I think he described it as being like almost a semi-professional mountain climber. And he went to the magazine and says, if I'm going to do this story, I want to go to the top of Mount Everest. And they eventually agreed that he could do the story, taking everyone to the top of Mount Everest. Now, unfortunately, Mother Nature does not cooperate all the time. And the people climbing to the top of Mount Everest met with a disastrous storm, and there were numerous deaths on this expedition going to the top of Mount Everest. And just the way John Krakauer describes just the need of these people to go to the top of Mount Everest, it's an obsession. And just what Mother Nature can do unexpectedly to these people. It is just a fascinating glimpse into the human psychology of mountain climbing and nature and what it can do. Prompt number 6, Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown and illustrated. Do you read at bedtime? Do you read to someone else at bedtime? Did you ever read to you at bed? Did anyone ever read to you at bedtime? No, I tend not to read close to bedtime. Usually what happens, my wife and I are up together, usually in the living room, and she goes to bed first. And I give her about 20, 25 minutes to fall asleep before I turn in myself. And usually after she turns in, I putz around the house and do other things. I have my nightcap of tequila or vodka and get myself ready for bed, and I have a shower. So I usually do not read directly before bed. I don't remember being read to a lot as a child. I'm sure it happened occasionally, but it's not anything that I remember very distinctly. Prompt number 7, Guess How Much I Love You by Sam McBratney and illustrated by Anita Jones. Who had the biggest influences on you as a reader? It depends on how you want to answer this question. I think it's somewhat answered by H.P. Lovecraft because he started me off my love of reading. As for a person, I guess it would be whoever owned that book of Lovecraft. It either belonged to my father or my older brother. Neither one of them ever fessed up to own that book. Of course, I'm not sure I even asked who owned the book. I just found the book in the basement and started reading it. So one of those two, or Lovecraft, it's not something that I could really answer that easily. And prompt number 8, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Which book or set of books would you give to an emerging reader? Or which book have you given as a gift more than once? I would never try to give a gift to an emerging reader. If I was ever in that situation, I would turn to my wife and say, you need to pick this book, because there's no way I can guess what a young person would want to read. And I don't tend to give books as gifts. It's just too hard to pick. My personal choice in books that I love is not going to be someone else's choice. So I consider it a highly dubious task to buy books as gifts. I think Steve Donahue said it best in an old tag from last year. If you want to give a book as a gift, give a gift certificate to a bookstore near to where that person lives. And that is the end of the tag. It's traditional to tag other people. And I am going to start up a little tradition here of tagging people who may not otherwise read a lot of picture books. I'm going to pick Ellen at Big Hard Books and Classics. And I'm going to pick CriminOlly. Now, CriminOlly is a little more doubtful. He has a 14 or 15-year-old son, and he may have read his son picture books in the past. But I'd still be interested to see what he would pick on the Picture This Book tag. So thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Goodbye.